It really fills my mouth up with flavor here. Crushed oyster shells and clam shells and things like that. Takes me immediately back to my time in Chile. They'll like that. They'll like that.
The liquid culture.
What's up, everybody? Thank you for being here with me on today's big dog episode of the Liquid Culture. Today's episode's pretty big for a couple of reasons. One, the content's pretty big. It'll be a pretty intense episode. Two, trying out a new format today because since this will be such a kind of a big undertaking, you see we've got 4 bottles here. I've got a lot to say about these wines, and I don't really feel like being rushed on it. So trying out a new format, going to film a full episode here. It'll probably run in that 30 to 40 minute time frame. But once I'm done with that, I'm going to film a series of little short 2 to 3 minute videos about each individual wine on their own and post those up on Instagram TV for those of you who don't have time to go through the full-fledged ep. As always, we'll have a write-up on the site as well so that you can really kind of dig in and geek out on some of these South American wines that we've got here today. Third reason why this is a big episode is probably going to be the last time you see us filming here in the old Ab Astris tasting room. My wife and I have purchased a home in town that eventually will be a rental house for us, but want to live in it for a little bit to work out some of the kinks, do a little bit of reno, and that'll be my primary office and studio for the time being. So say goodbye to Ab Astris, and maybe we'll be back here for another episode, maybe a little special travel episode or something like that. But today's episode, guys, as you can tell from the title and from the wines in front of me, is all about the wines of South America. Now, this is a follow-up episode for the very first project that I actually put on the website, which was my pre-South America trip project, where I did 4, maybe actually I think I did 5 wines. And that project, it was a little primer not only for me but for you guys before I went and took a trip to South America, in particular Argentina and Chile, to check out the wine scene down there. So this is the follow-up. A few bottles that I brought back. We'll be talking about a little bit about the regions and the grapes and things you can expect, but primarily what I wanted to do was highlight some of the places that I visited, some places that I didn't visit, and talk about Malbec, which is the big guy there in South America usually, but I wanted to continue a little bit about that same narrative that I did in the first project, where we talk a little bit about, what are some of the other grapes and wine styles that you can expect from South America besides just your big, bold, inky Malbecs. There's some other stuff going on down there, so that's a little bit of the focus today as well. So let's dive in. Like I said earlier, we'll have a we'll have a write-up on the website with all the really nitty-gritty, juicy details for all the wines, not only the wineries that I visited, but also the wines that we're tasting here today, some of which I visited and some I did not. At the same token, some of the places that I visited, I did not bring wines to taste on video today. They didn't either fit the narrative or couldn't get the bottles back, and still can't get them, which I'm a little bit upset about. So first wine, we are going to start off with a little kind of classic standby here, guys. We are going with the El Enemigo, the Enemy Malbec from Mendoza. Now, it's not a 100% Malbec. It's about 90%. So, I mean, it's definitely the predominant grape in the blend here. But I would say that this I wanted to pick kind of a standard, typical, what you might find from Argentina and in Mendoza in particular. Now, El Enemigo, this is a wine that it's a relatively new producer. I mean, it was started by Alejandro Vigil, who is the head winemaker at Catena Zapata, which is a very big name there in Argentina. Made a really wide range of wines from your kind of cheap bulk $10 Malbecs all the way up to some very, very high end and very powerful red blends, Malbecs, and things like that. So this is a project that was started by him back in 2009. The El Enemigo that we're tasting today is kind of the base level offering that he has. There's some single varietal stuff as well as I think they do a blend. The big dog in this label is the Gran Enemigo, which you could tell from the name. That's a 100-point Cabernet Franc made by the same winemaker here, Mr. Alejandro. And so you can kind of see that there's a little bit of pedigree behind this wine and this producer. The vineyards are all planted in the Uco Valley, which is in the foothills of the Andes, at about 5,000 feet above sea level. So the terroir, Uco Valley, is kind of known as the best terroir in Mendoza, kind of sub region within Mendoza in Argentina. And I'm expecting big things out of this wine. I have not had this wine before. So this is their 2015 Malbec. I'm getting a really big kind of like almost like coffee kind of thing on the nose. In addition to like crushed granite with all of what you would kind of expect along with that with a Malbec from Argentina, there's the big black currant, there's dark fruits, brambly fruits like blackberries. This wine's doing it's got a very complex nose, a lot of things going on. I think I'm even picking up some like herb crusted like game meat that's been like grilled on an open fire kind of thing. Like maybe we marinated or rubbed like a lamb shoulder with some rosemary and some thyme and cooked it over an open flame. And somebody's brewing up a pot of coffee in the background. Really, really complex nose. Color, nice, inky, dark, purple, what you would expect from a Mendoza Malbec here. Let's give it a sip. Very powerful on the mid palate. It really fills my mouth up with flavor here. More so the dark fruits than any of those other tertiary flavors, but a really well balanced. The tannin, it's kind of all over the mouth. It's not really in just one place, but it's not an ultra powerful, rip your face off kind of tannin. Really supple, really well integrated, velvety palate on this wine. I would say I'd call it like a medium plus body, so it's big body, but I would say the tannin and acid are right there in that medium place where it makes this a really nice, creamy, velvety wine. Man, don't want to get any of this on the white shirt here. I have a feeling my teeth are going to be stained by the end of this episode. 27 bucks, guys. 27 bucks for this bottle. Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think so I brought this bottle back from me. I purchased this at a bottle shop in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I have not seen it here in the States at a bottle shop, but you can find this wine on wine.com. I don't know if it's the specific vintage, but if you're a wine.com user, I would absolutely add a bottle of this to your next purchase and probably even check out more of their offerings. This is the first wine I've had from these guys. I do have a bottle of the Gran Enemigo, which I'm very much looking forward to because I love Cab Franc. This is a really, really, really tasty wine for $27. Just a very, kind of unassuming label. The bottle, tiny, very lightweight. I mean, they didn't put a lot of money into the packaging of this, which you can tell translates to the price you're getting for the quality of wine that's in the bottle. I would absolutely recommend this wine. A lot of stuff going on with the nose, really velvety palate. I would for sure look to pair this wine with with some of those kind of, like I was saying, if you're doing any sort of outdoor grilling, especially with game meat this fall, I would absolutely recommend pairing it with this wine. Go ahead and put your purchase in on wine.com right now and get that delivered to you just in time for some of your little fall cookouts. I think that would be an excellent choice. By the way, guys, I have kind of already caught myself saying wine.com a couple of times, and I want to clarify something here. I'm not in any way sponsored by wine.com or trying to push you guys onto wine.com. It just so happens to be a place that I do a lot of my not only research but wine shopping. And when you can't find certain things in some of the wine stores we have here in Texas, wine.com is the place where you can go to find things that are a little bit more sparse, but that you can absolutely get and have shipped to you, and a lot of times at a really good price point, especially if you're catching them during one of their kind of sales that they have going on, which seem like are always happening. So let's move this guy aside here and move on to the next wine. Desierto Pampa. This is another wine that I purchased when I was in Buenos Aires and carried back with me in my luggage. This wine is a blend, so we are moving on, and from here on out, guys, everything we taste is going to be a blend. Also 2015. This is a blend of Malbec, Cab Franc, and Merlot. So you have that Malbec here. It's at 40% of the blend, so definitely a big backbone of Malbec here coming into play. But Cab Franc, as I already mentioned before, is being planted pretty widely there, not only in Argentina, but in Chile as well, and Merlot. So we've got 40-40 Malbec, Cab Franc, and 20% Merlot. We crank up the alcohol. The first one we were at 13.5, which for the power that thing was bringing, 13.5, that's awesome. This one's 14.6, so we're really jumping it up, but we're in about the same price point here, guys, at about 20 bucks a bottle for this. But I'll tell you why I wanted to include this one here in the lineup after I take a sniff. Already on the nose, this one smells like it's on the lower end of that dark fruit spectrum, so we might be even getting more towards into the red fruit category here with this wine. It is slightly lighter and more leaning towards garnet than, or I would say ruby, sorry, leaning more towards ruby than the purple that we had on the first wine, but still looks nice and thick. But definitely leading more towards the red fruits, and it almost has this saltiness to it. It's almost got like this saline kind of quality, like crushed oyster shells and clam shells and things like that. So guys, the reason I included this is that this wine is produced in the Patagonia, which the Patagonia, if you're probably familiar with the clothing brand Patagonia. Patagonia is actually a real place in South America, at the southernmost tip of South America, and it's partially in Argentina, well, mostly in Argentina, and a little bit of it even creeps over into Chile. We're at kind of the lowest latitudes here for grape growing. We're starting to get into really cool temperatures here, but the Patagonia is a really interesting topographical area because you've got desert and you've got these kind of very cold areas as well, and you've got these pampa, which are kind of like vast ranging, almost like prairies. So Desierto Pampa, Desierto is the producer, and then Pampa is kind of like their line, this particular line of wines. This is their blend, 2015 blend. Patagonia is a really interesting place, especially for viticulture, because what you have is a very arid, but very cold, not very cold, a cold, arid climate at low elevation. So it's really interesting, and I had, when I was in Argentina and when I was in Chile, I had a lot of wines from the Patagonia, and a lot of them really blew me away, including some like Pinot Noir, which is being grown there. And I saw this wine, cool blend, Malbec, Cab Franc, Merlot from Patagonia, wanted to give it a shot. Much like the El Enemigo, I have never tasted this wine before. As I swirl it around in the glass a little bit, some of that fruit is starting to seem like it is intensifying a little bit of that salinity and that oyster shell is going away, and we're getting a little bit more fruit character on the nose now. I would say that's so this is, we talk about this a lot on the channel. For a wine that's almost a full percentage point higher, more than a full percentage point higher in alcohol, the acidity on this wine is higher. But the body, I mean, I would put this one in like, where this was like medium plus body, medium on tannin and acid. This guy's like medium body, medium plus tannin, medium acid. That acid comes, well, now I'm getting a little bit more tannin in the front here, but that acid is really carrying this. So you can tell with this wine, it was made in a cooler climate region because that acidity is still maintained there. The Cab Franc isn't really shining through as much as I thought that it would. Typically Cab Franc, you get some kind of green characteristic. Well, there is, now that I'm diving back in, there is a little brambly thing, almost like, you know, the stems, you know, like some of this probably was whole cluster fermented, because you got a little stemminess in there, but it's not towards that green pyrazine kind of thing that you can get with Cab Franc. Interesting. A little bit out of whack for me. It's not really taking me on a very good ride structurally. I feel like this wine might be one that may be better tomorrow. So just a heads up, all these have been decanted for about an hour. They're at about 60 degrees, so pretty much perfect at this point. I like the nose and I like the flavor profile, but the structure is not really doing it for me right now. So I'll drink some more of this wine, you know, kind of later on, and kind of tell you what I think about it as it develops a little bit more and has had some oxygen to it and that kind of thing. But I think it's still very interesting, and I think that this might be a wine that would be much like a lot of the wines that I had from Patagonia when I was in South America. They were always paired with food. And I think that especially more elegant foods, this might be a wine that's a little bit more catered towards that. It needs to be paired with some food, and it might be able to show a little bit more of that characteristic that I really enjoyed in a lot of Patagonian wines that I had when I was in South America. So we're changing countries now, guys. So a little bit about the overall geography of South America. We're like I said, we're keeping to Argentina and Chile in this video, much like we did in the first iteration of this kind of South America trip here. Chile and Argentina, they produce the bulk of the wine there, or at least the bulk of the wine that's kind of considered fine wine for export. So we're sticking to Argentina and Chile. So what you have is a very interesting juxtaposition, though. Argentina is a big country, and what you have is a dividing line between Argentina and Chile of the Andes Mountains. That really creates the border between Argentina and Chile, and a lot of the best vineyards are planted in Argentina along the foothills of the Andes Mountains. Chile is an interestingly shaped country because it's very long. I think it's about 2,700 miles in length, but only at its widest point about 200 miles wide. At the majority of the points in Chile, you're only looking at about 100 to 150 miles in width. So very, very long, and it's got these incredible borders. You've got the Andes Mountains to the west, Andes Mountains to the east, Pacific Ocean to the west. You've got desert up north, and you've got very cold kind of tundra to the south. So you have these four natural borders that create an area in Chile where pretty much the entire country you can plant organic vineyards. They are considered phylloxera free. Sorry about that. They are considered phylloxera free in Chile. So therefore you see quite a bit of organic and biodynamic vineyard sites, which was really cool because, you know, I mentioned in the write-up how there's not really a lot of kind of mom and pop small family vineyards, boutique vineyards in the kind of way that we think about them here in the States. Because South America is so big and because so much of their economy is based off of agriculture and export, even the smallest boutique family wineries are making, you know, massive amounts of wine from massive vineyard acreage. It's pretty crazy, but it's really interesting kind of juxtaposition to see somebody like this winery, which I did visit in Chile, Emiliana. And guys, this is a wine that you can get pretty regularly here. Wine.com has it. I've seen it at H-E-B. I've even seen it at Total Wine. So you can find this wine. So I would seek it out for sure. And this is the first wine in the panel here that I actually have had in the past. But Emiliana is really, really interesting. It was founded in 1986, and the kind of initiative when this winery was started was to bolster up this organic viticulture and wine making industry. They knew what they had there with the terroir in Chile and what they could do with it, and what they set out immediately to start organic and eventually biodynamic farming practices for their vineyard. Now, they utilize vineyards all over Chile, so this, I think, Colchagua is the region that these grapes came from for this wine, but they're utilizing vineyard space all over Chile. But with 2,800 plus acres, half of that, now 2,800 plus acres, that's a shitload of acreage for vines. We have 15 here. 15? 12. We have 12 acres here at Ab Astris, which is considered rather manageable for a small family-owned operation here in Texas. I would say, you know, for the bigger guys here in the hill country, you're looking at upwards of maybe 80 acres, and that's considered a ton of acreage. These guys have 2,800 plus acres of vine in Chile. Half of that is already certified organic and biodynamic, and every year they're continuing to build that more and more. Obviously, there's a big kind of process that you have to go to get verified as such. But in 2003, their ghee, which is their highest end wine, that's kind of getting close to that $100 a bottle spot, was the first certified biodynamic wine to be released in Chile. So these guys are kind of the pioneers behind growing organic. You know, in the States we think a lot about organic or biodynamic vineyards as very small, kind of almost boutique-y natural wine, produce very little wine, only can be snagged up in New York or LA where there's this big natural wine scene because they make so little of the wine. For this wine here, the Emiliana 2015 Coyam, plenty of this wine is produced, guys. All organic, native yeast, hand harvested. I mean, they check all the boxes of the natural wine scene, except for the fact that they make a ton of this wine. So, kind of interesting. Kind of something that, you know, for me is kind of fun to think about and ponder in terms of the overall kind of dogma of natural wine and organic wine and biodynamic wine, and to have something like this come in and check all those boxes but be done on such a large scale it's interesting. It's very interesting. So guys, this wine, like I said, we got blends coming in hot. So 44% Syrah, 30% Carmenere. So most of us know Syrah. That's a pretty common grape. Carmenere. If you don't know Carmenere, very, very big grape in Chile. Carmenere is originally a Bordeaux grape varietal, but planted all over the place in Chile. Almost every winery in Chile makes a Carmenere, or at least puts Carmenere in one of their blends. So 30%, it makes up a pretty big portion of this blend here. Carmenere is a very spicy, can be a little bit austere at times, earthy kind of a grape. So I'm really liking when I tasted this when I was in Chile at Emiliana. I really liked what the Carmenere did to the Syrah. Curious to see how the transport did. See how it tastes today. 12% Cabernet, and then a bunch of other stuff mixed in here, Mourvèdre, Malbec, Grenache, Tempranillo, Petit Verdot. So big blend here, guys. We're looking at about 14.5% alcohol, $37 bottle. $37 bottle. This is, they have only one wine that's considered higher end than this wine, which is that Guy. But for me, we tried them all. This was my favorite wine of the mix, so that's why I wanted to include it here in the tasting today. So, sticking my nose into this wine takes me immediately back to my time in Chile. A lot of the wines there have this similar nose to them, or at least a similar component on the nose. I think it probably comes from that Carmenere. And kind of the, probably just the overall environment that's there in Chile. Like I said, it's pretty long, but relatively narrow. And most of the wineries that I visited were right there kind of in that central area surrounding Santiago. And pretty much everything I tasted had kind of this very reminiscent nose to it. It's almost like if you took the darkest fruits possible but picked them and ate them when they were at their most underripeness. So you have this black fruit quality, but it's very soft and very elegant. Along with this kind of almost like a Pirozzini spice, like a green bell pepper that you get from the Carmenere. Almost black pepper, crushed black pepper with a little bit of like fresh, like green bell pepper. So, of the three wines so far, this one has the biggest tannin. But in terms of overall flavor profile, it's probably the most elegant. The first two were a little bit rustic almost in their flavor profile. This is a very polished wine, a very elegant wine. A wine that I am enjoying just as much now as I did when I was at the vineyard there, at the winery. It takes on almost, there are no Italian varietals in this wine, but it has this almost very soft Italian wine kind of vibe going on with it. It's got nice red cherries, almost leading towards black cherries. Very soft, big tannin, but you don't really care about it. Like it's there, but you're not thinking to yourself, oh my God, like my mouth is drying out, what am I gonna do? Probably because there's a good amount of acidity still left with this wine to really kind of flush your mouth after that tannin has sucked it dry. Guys, I'm not gonna go too deep into trying to pick out all the complexities of this wine. I don't even think it's really all that complex. It's just really, really good. It's just really, really elegant and restrained and delicious and chuggable, but at the same time has all of this powerful structure that would pair well with food, that would allow this wine to age over time. It's a 2015, and I think that this wine could for sure age another 5 to 10 years and develop some more tertiary qualities, because right now it's mostly fruit. Right now it's mostly fruit. To be totally honest, there's not a ton of other tertiary flavors going on. It's a lot of fruit quality, but I think over the next 5 to 10 years, a bottle of this wine stored properly could really start to develop something really kind of magical. But right now, it's just something I kind of want to just like sit and like luxuriate in and just look out, you know, at the clouds and just sip on this wine. It's very, very tasty. I would highly, highly rec this wine. I'm not even going to pour any of that out. So let's get these kind of keep them in order here. Okay, last but not least, let me get you the label here, Santa Rita. So I picked this wine for a very specific reason. This was the last winery that we visited on our trip to Chile for wine. This is by far the most kind of commercial enterprise of the lineup here. Santa Rita is one of the biggest wineries in all of Chile. They produce a ton of wine, like millions of cases of wine. And you probably recognize the name because they make a lot of kind of bulk, cheap wine from Chile. And you know, what they're kind of doing, I think it's great. You know, I'm all for capitalism. Build it as big as you can. Tourism is a very major piece of their revenue stream. The grounds are phenomenal. Beautiful gardens, beautiful old buildings. There's a museum there, the restaurant there. It seems like the wine has gotten them to a point where they now are looking at other things as revenue stream. And that's great. If you can take something that you started back in 1880 and grow it into a very successful business and expand it beyond just, you know, making wine, I think that that's great. And it makes wine more accessible to everybody. But for me, when we did the tasting at the end, pretty much every wine tasted very mass-produced. It tasted like it was meant to kind of meet a palate as opposed to taking grapes from terroir, trying to highlight them as best as possible and make something with a lot of passion. So, you know, I'm curious to see. This was easily the best wine that I tasted in that lineup, and it's their mid-tier kind of wine, much like with the Coyam from Emiliana. The mid-tier is what really kind of stood out to me, but I have not tasted it since I was at the winery, and I'm curious to see if it stood out as, you know, sorry to say, kind of the best of a bad bunch of wines, or if it actually was good. And I'm curious to see how it stands up to the other three on the panel here, which have obviously, the Coyam and the El Enemigo obviously have been really, really standout wines in my opinion. So I'm curious to see how it stands up to that. On the nose, I mean, it definitely has some of that kind of same spectrum of fruit as the Coyam had, but less elegant. So it's more towards that kind of jammy, cooked dark fruit kind of thing, as opposed to the fresh dark fruits and the underripe dark fruits. It's definitely more towards the darker end of the spectrum. And I would say that the oak is playing the biggest, of all the wines on the panel here, the oak plays the biggest role in this wine. You definitely get some of that kind of cedary, eucalyptus kind of thing, along with those kind of black currants, cassis, licorice, kind of dark plum and blackberry kind of vibe. So the blend here is Cabernet Franc, 65% Cabernet Franc, 30% Cabernet Sauvignon, and 5% Carmenere. Again, much like the Coyam, I'm not pulling out a ton from that I was looking for, kind of, or with the Coyam and with the Desierto Pampa. Not pulling out as much of that I would think of those kind of tertiary aromas that you get from Cab Franc and Carmenere. A little bit of spice, a little bit of peppery kind of spice on this. Okay, what I want to say about this wine. my wife tells me that I need to frame these things pretty, in a better way, because sometimes my bias can come out. This wine tastes to me like it was made to meet a palate. It was made to meet a desire and the large market that there is out there for this kind of new world, big tannic, bold, oaky, Cabernet type wine. It is predominantly Cab Franc, but this to me tastes like kind of a big extracted oaky Cabernet from Napa or someplace like that. A lot of tannin all over the place that doesn't have enough of that acid in there to kind of quench your dried palate like the Koyam did. Big body, big tannin, medium-ish acid, definitely towards the dark end of the fruit spectrum, and a lot of oak quality on this wine. So we're celebrating my niece's birthday tonight, so I'm for sure bringing this bottle over to the house, because I know for a fact that my father-in-law and brother-in-law love wines in this style, and I think that at $39, this really kind of meets that, that desired flavor profile and structure, and I think they'll be pretty pleased with this wine. It's not in my kind of realm of wines that I really enjoy, but overall still a well-made wine, I think. Yeah, they'll like that. They'll like that. I'll drink the Koyam, they can drink the Triple C. Win-win situation. So, all right, guys, that's it. I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to touch on. Anything that we didn't touch on here today will for sure be in the write-up. We'll, for the one or two of you out there that really like to geek out on this stuff, I'll make sure to have all the kind of vineyard notes and things like that in the write-up. Talk a little bit more about the wines and the terroir and the producers and their background and all that good stuff. But I think that for me, my recs on this, guys, would be 100% the El Enemigo and the Koyam, which is great because both of these wines are available here in the States and in Texas for sure. I know that we run into some issues with certain wines here in Texas, but El Enemigo, 27 bucks. You can definitely get that shipped to you from wine.com. Koyam, 37 bucks. You can find it at HEB, also on wine.com, maybe even at like Total Wine or Specs. I would check that out. So those are my recs, guys. Those are my recs for today's video. Thanks for being here with me. Next time we chat, I'll be in the new house, in the new studio, new backdrop, the third or fourth time we've changed that up since the birth of the liquid culture. So, all right, guys, appreciate you being here. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.